Welcome to another episode of Living Well with Rent Well. I'm your co-host TJ Hock. With us today is Adrian. How are you, Adrian?
Hey, doing great, TJ. Thanks for having me on the program.
Yeah, appreciate it. We are here to talk about anxiety at work, which I think it's a common topic these days, especially in our space, property management. And before we dig into it, I'd love to just if you could share more about you and your experience and your background with our listeners, and then we can jump into it.
Yeah, I've been writing on culture, leadership for the last 20 years. Wrote a book called The Carrot Principle years ago, and recently I've written a couple books one called All In on culture, one called Leading with Gratitude on how we make our people feel valued, and this latest book came out during the midst of the pandemic called Anxiety at Work. We were working on this already because it was sort of the unspoken issue in our workplaces that people were feeling pressure, anxiety, stress, but we never talked about it. And then when the pandemic hit, well, all of a sudden we were all talking about it and it became much safer. So that's where anxiety at work came from.
Yeah. Well, so let's talk about that more. I perhaps the subtitle of your book, if I remember correctly, was something like "How to Overcome the Fear and Reduce the Stress in the Workplace." And so I'd be curious to hear, like, what from your research, what is anxiety?
And it's interesting. It's a good question to start with because, we sort of use these terms interchangeably: worry, stress, and anxiety, and they're all very different. Worry, we may worry, oh my gosh, I've got to make a presentation to a new client. That's a worry. Now, what happens when we have lots of worries in our lives, like what's happening in property management and real estate right now? It starts to lead to stress. Now, stress is when our bodies start reacting. And we all know the impact of stress over a long period of time on our bodies. Nothing good comes of that. Now, the nice part is if those stressors are removed, for most of us, we start to relax again. Anxiety exists even when the stressors are removed. And the sad part is right now, about 40% of people in their 20s have an anxiety disorder, which means even if you make the world completely stress-free, which is impossible for you people who are in their 20s, they're still going to be feeling this. And so we've got to start talking about anxiety.
Why do you think it's so prevalent in the work? I mean, that's a staggering number. And I think in somewhere listening to one of your other shows or maybe reading, I think I heard the number 75% of people left their job due to anxiety. And so I'm just curious, why?
Yeah, so that's an interesting statistic we're finding. So about half of millennials say they've left a job for mental health reasons, 75% of Gen Z. So anybody under 26, 27 or so. And you start thinking about, do we ever hire anybody in that age group? Of course, that's many of the people we're hiring into property management. And what we found is this younger generation, especially when we interviewed dozens of younger people for the book, and they told us in every conversation we have with each other, we talk about our mental health, but we never talk about it with you oldies because you just don't get it. And so it was really interesting that they're saying, look, and you ask a really good question. Is it more prevalent now? What's happening? In many cases, it's just spoken about more. This is a generation that is much more comfortable talking about their mental health. If you and I say to each other, how you doing? We go, what do we do? Fine, right? They dig below the fine. They go, really, TJ? Are you really doing fine? Because this is what I'm feeling right now. And it's so much safer for them to talk about things. Well, that's what they're expecting in the workplace. And so, there's a lot of reasons and a lot of research has been done on why we're seeing more now than before. This is a generation that grew up with helicopter parents who knew where they were every minute of the day. Why are you worrying about me so much? They did active shooter drills in schools. They did, they had cell phones with them 24/7, which have been tied to incredibly higher levels of stress and anxiety in people. They're on social media, which creates stress and anxiety as we compare ourselves to others. So there's a lot that goes into this. We, as the Gen X, the baby boomers, et cetera, we created this, and we have to now see this through.
You said something that made me think of. somewhere along the lines, I read that kind of across the nation, there's this movement for the younger generation. I don't even know what to call the generations anymore, but let's just
Yeah,
say under
yeah,
the age of 30, where it's kind of like they're pushing when 5 o'clock hits, you're done. Stop working for quote unquote the man,
yeah.
and if you need a mental health day, just take it. And if you need, it's your birthday, just take the day off. And it's curious because that's just not the way that I'm wired. The people that I surround myself by are not really that wired. And like I really struggle as a business owner and as a leader of how do you work with that type of personality? Because I think you could make it pretty personal, and like you don't want to cross that line and cross that boundary. And it's so I guess what any tips or tricks or
No,
guidance on.
Well, this is important what you're bringing up here. In fact, I was at one of the big defense contractors a couple of years ago before the pandemic, and 300 people, senior leaders in the room, multi-billion dollar company. And we had some time for Q&A at the end. And they brought up a lot of the things you're bringing up. It was amazing that every question was about this younger generation coming in. How come they don't get it? How come they, and not one of the person was asking, well, what do we do differently? Because they were all saying, no, they have got to change. Now, you look at property management, our customers have demands, they need their, my tap's dripping, I want it fixed today, et cetera. All the demands of your working world. But if you keep thinking that you're going to be able to do things the way you did 20 years ago, you're going to be alone doing these. So the trend you're talking about of people, it's 5, I'm going home, it has this term quiet quitting. And the idea is I've talked to younger people, they say, look, I'm making barely above minimum wage. I'm going to do what you pay me for, but no more. Because we used to think of it when we would start work back in my day, we would call them entry-level jobs. Today, they call them dead-end jobs. And and it's a little harsh. It's like, what do you think you're going to promote me from this? No. And there's a lot of cynicism within this generation. And if you get them to open up and start talking to you, it's really, they have a term they call eat the rich. That they all know about and they all talk about, and they all think we're a little bit of fat cats that are, not all of us, but they're making money off these people that are doing these menial jobs. So now I'm painting rather a bleak picture, but you got to open your eyes to see that the thought process we had coming in is not the same. And we tend to put on blinders and see everybody the way we are, and they're not. And so with that in mind, you still need these people. You still need to get younger people. So how do you do it? Well, it's being more vulnerable as a leader. It's actually caring about your people. It's amazing the loyalty that will come when you reach out a little bit. You're a little bit more vulnerable, a little bit more caring about the people in your care.
So, it's funny you bring up the word vulnerability. We are officially launching the EOS model in our business. And as part of that process, we had to redefine our values. And the one value that we came up with was be vulnerable. But what goes through my mind is, okay, as a leader, I'm choosing to be more vulnerable. I'm choosing to ask more, I guess, questions to get into their head and really see, like, how are they doing actually? But when do you know you're about to cross that boundary, right, of going from manager, mentor, leadership, whatever title you want to put on it, that now you kind of are moving into that friend zone?
Yeah.
Or is that really what, sounds like we're dating, friend zone, or is that really kind of what they're looking for, this younger generation, that they're looking to be more friends with their managers? And like, is there a line of delineation there?
Oh, absolutely. One of the ideas is you want to start with the work relationship. You're still the boss. You don't want to be Michael Scott from The Office, wanting to be everybody's best friend. That's not what we're talking about here. Well, there's some really actually simple language is that you want them to open up. And so you use this term, I noticed. I noticed, TJ, you're usually the first here every day. The last little while, you've been a little late. Is everything okay? You start with the work. I noticed when we're doing our brainstormings in the mornings before we all go out, usually you have lots of great ideas. You're offering up all the cool things that are going on. you've been a little quiet lately. Is everything okay? You start with the work, but those two simple words are, I noticed. Well, they translate to I care. But you're not saying, gee, TJ, you got big bags under your eyes. Everything okay at home? Everything okay with the missus? No, no. You're starting with the work. That way, you're keeping this still a very professional relationship, but you're paying attention. And we used to say, look, leave your personal life at the door. That's not the way that especially anybody under 30 wants to work anymore. And really nobody does. We're spending more time at work than we do anywhere else. So I want to know that my boss actually knows me as an individual, cares, and is paying attention, especially in these tough times.
Yeah. So the one question I was going to ask is, how do you create healthy debate? Like using the example I noticed, because what's going through my mind is you have quarterly reviews.
Sure.
My personality, I think I'm getting better, but I've noticed that when I have to bring constructive criticism to the person, it's usually shut down or not received well. You can see the barrier goes up, and I know that I can work on the way that I present it. What are your thoughts on how to create healthy debate with this?
Yeah, because and it's not just a generational discussion. A lot of people don't. We did one. I read for Forbes, and we did one study that showed 90% of leaders, managers, etc., avoid having tough conversations with their people. Why? Because they're just going to react badly. It's going to be a whole thing. It's not worth it, and yet 67% of employees said they feel shortchanged when it comes to getting honest feedback from their managers. So there are some ways to do this. Debate, tough conversations are inevitable. When we come with a very open and honest way to present, we come to have a conversation versus I need to tell you something. You come and you talk about one of I love that you're doing this mission values exercise, because when you have values, say one of your values is ownership. Well, okay, so I come to you and I say, TJ, it didn't seem like you were taking ownership when you left that job without finishing this, and this. Ownership's one of our core values around here. Tell me what happened. But I'm not just saying, look, you're a bad guy. I'm talking about the value. So it becomes more of a value conversation. And we start talking about it. But I'm being honest about the situation, and I'm not sugarcoating it. But I want to have a conversation about, are we living up to our values? And you're able to say, well, no, but I didn't have the equipment I needed. And I said, okay, great. And it's a back and forth versus, I'm just telling you what you are doing that is bad. So that kind of openness is vital as we start sharing.
So I'm curious, you've got a few books now. What was the driver behind anxiety at work? What were you noticing? What patterns? I guess why?
Well, I began writing it in 2019 when, and my son, who actually was a contributing author, he was a co-author on the book. He's now 27. He's a brilliant young man. He's got a master's degree from University of Southern California in stem cell biology and regenerative medicine. So he's very bright. He's worked in genetics labs for 3-4 years. And as he started working in these labs, he asked me one day, he says, do you guys ever you and Chester do anything on anxiety at work? He says, because I've lived with anxiety, and some of the managers I'm working with really get me and get the best out of me, and some just don't get me at all. And I said, oh, no. We never talk about mental health in the workplace. That's not our place to talk about. And he goes, really? He says, because my generation, we talk about it all the time. And I started kind of mulling this around in my mind and realizing we started doing, I pulled up the statistics that shows 1 in 5 people from age, 8 to 80 has a full-blown anxiety disorder. So that's 19, it's actually really? 19%. Yeah. So imagine that 1 in 5 people, in the workplace have broken arms, and we don't talk about broken arms because no. It's just ridiculous. It was this huge number that nobody was talking about. And so actually he actually helped me with the book after he graduated with his undergrad. And we started working on this. And then the pandemic hit. And my publisher in March of 2020 called and said, hey, remember that book you're writing on anxiety? how soon can we get that out? Because she said, this is going to be a big problem. And it was, because we've gone through the pandemic and we were kind of mostly kind of coming through that. But there's this tail to the pandemic, which is the mental health impact. It's impacted everything, even if we don't want to admit it. We went on vacation to one of our favorite spots recently, and it was just different. Everything has changed. And many people are not even still talking about it, what it's done to us.
Have you noticed? Yeah, that's fascinating. It's like, have you found any correlation between the anxiety in the workplace and being remote versus in the office, or probably even now the conversations that are happening of we're going from remote back to the office? I know there's a lot of fighting it against that.
Yeah. Today, I just was reading Bob Iger at Disney saying everybody needs to be back in the office 4 days now, not the 2 or 3 that they were hoping for. And so you're right, hybrid work. The one thing I do a lot of executive coaching. One thing I tell the leaders that I'm working with is, you're not the only one who hasn't figured out hybrid work. Everybody's trying to figure this out. And it's hard because people loved this, being able to come and go as they please. And so what we're finding is but did it increase levels of anxiety? Absolutely. Because all of a sudden I'm not interacting with my boss as much. And, many of your managers, they, doing property management or other real estate, they may not be in the office with their people as much. And so they may learn this. But what we found is that there's a lot of stressors in other people's, parts of other people's lives, and that their manager can actually help reduce tensions and stress by, being there more for their people. So this world of remote absolutely has increased feelings of loneliness, feelings of stress. One CEO was telling me, he says, we've gone fully remote. He says, and I was talking to one of my employees recently, and she told me, she says, my kids are at college. I'm divorced. She says, I haven't had a hug in 3 months. She says, I haven't really had that kind of interaction with anybody. And he was just like, wow, there are things out there that I need to be more aware of.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I find it fascinating that it's, when you read of some of these cultures or tribes where the longevity of their life is all about being together. And it feels like us as a society, we're moving in the opposite direction, where it's more and more individual and being isolated. And, I have to imagine that creates all kinds of other, not to blur the words, but like anxieties or stressors, or because you're just missing that connection. And like Zoom is great and, all that, but it's different than being together in person. And at least what I found in our organization is, by not being together in person as often, it creates a lot of assumptions about something that may have happened or a conversation that may have happened. And where it was easier before to just walk down the hall and have that conversation with somebody, hey, you had mentioned this and it's been weighing on me, like, can we just talk about it? Well, now you have to be a lot more purposeful about it. Like, let's get on the Zoom, or let's pick up the phone, and so we're not having some of those conversations that we otherwise maybe would have had. And so things are lingering and probably festering, and you know what they say about assume.
No, and we can't, in this hybrid world, we can't let things, you kind of have a niggling thought, you got to act on it. You're exactly right. And there's just little things we're doing. Like, for example, when you're on Zoom, like you are right now, you're a little further back. And people can't see you right now, but you're in the frame up to about your mid sternum there, which is good because I see your hands moving. There are certain things that happen when we get really close into the screen. You can't see people sort of reacting, and those hand gestures are actually quite important in human behavior. So there are little things we've learned throughout Zoom that can help. But you're exactly right. There are times where you have to bring your people together now more than ever. And so if you have a group, maybe a group of people who go out and work on your properties once a week at least, bring them in, do a huddle, make sure there is some connection one to another and sharing of best ideas. One of the things we've found, which has been a good thing from this remote work, is that when people are together, there actually should be a reason for them being together instead of just this parallel work where you're doing your work and I'm doing my work. And now and then we look over at each other. Make sure those days when we are together, they're actually useful. And we
Yeah.
spend some time brainstorming together, sharing great ideas.
Yeah, I like that. More purposeful, working on being more present when you are together. We're almost at our time here. Any thoughts or suggestions for either managers, leaders, or employees on kind of how to help each other through this, or maybe I like your keyword here. I noticed.
Mm-hmm.
I really like the idea of Zoom, of kind of backing up a little bit so you can see the person's micro movements, so to speak. Moving their hands and some motion. I thought that's fascinating. Anything else to share?
There's a couple of things that are really important. And in the book Anxiety Work, we go into some chapters. And one of the first is to reduce uncertainty. And, managers listening may go, look, our whole world is uncertainty. I don't know how long I'm going to keep my clients. I don't know whether we're going to get new ones. I don't know if there's going to be, storms in California or, wherever I am, right? Or snow here in Park City, Utah. So, my world is uncertain. But what I need to know as an employee is that we're going into the dark together, at least. It may be uncertain, but you're not just pushing me out there on my own. So there's just a couple of things to bring down my uncertainty I need to know. The first is, where are we heading as an organization? Let me know you have a vision and a mission. That's why I love the work you're doing as a group, to say, what is our goal? There are really simple things I need to know. Where are we heading? Secondly, how am I doing individually? In the old world, we used to say, well, I'll let you know if you're not doing well. That doesn't work anymore. Because especially with younger people who we interviewed for our book, Leading with Gratitude, they told us, if my boss doesn't tell me I'm doing a good job, I will do it differently next time, and then differently again, until I finally get that affirmation. How incredibly unproductive. But again, we have to change our thinking. They're wired very differently than us. So first, where are we heading? Secondly, how am I doing? And the third, you want to bring down my anxiety? Let me know I have a future here. Don't promise me, employment forever, but just say, look, TJ, we really value what you're doing. I love how you do this, this, and this. You're very specific, and you let me know, you've got a future here. So we turn dead end jobs into those entry level and growing kinds of jobs.
Yes. Wow. I really like those 3 points. I appreciate you sharing that. I think I'd be curious to know too, as people are looking for jobs now, is that becoming part of the questions during the interview process, where the candidate will ask, well, tell me what your values are. What is your vision? Where are you guys headed? And if a company doesn't really have those answers, does that now put you at, the backseat of where that candidate would be looking to work for an organization?
Yeah. I was just in December, I was working with a huge automotive company, and they do repairs on vehicles, and their mission is nothing about repairing. It's about developing people. And these are, tough and rough, mostly men, kind of, greasy every day, fixing cars. And it's about, our mission is about developing people. And so do you think they're attracting the mechanics that want to grow and develop? Absolutely. They're getting the people out of the, the auto training, journeyman, et cetera, because they're coming into an organization that's not just about fixing stuff and making money. No, we're about developing you as an individual. We want you to make more money, but we also want you to grow, learn new skills, et cetera. Who wouldn't be excited about that? So, if you want to attract and develop people, you're not just, flying people from A to B if you're an airline. You're not just selling burgers and shakes if you're a restaurant. You're making the world better in some way. You got to help me understand what that is, and how I can make an impact. You do that, you're going to attract more people and keep them longer.
Yeah, I love that. It reminds me of Gary Keller from Keller Williams, who had said, we're a training company that just happens to sell real estate.
Yeah,
kind
exactly.
of the same twist. Adrian, I really appreciate your time. Thank you for sharing this knowledge. How if somebody wants to get a hold of you or learn more about you or your books, how would they do that?
Well, we have a website, thecultureworks.com, thecultureworks.com, or adriangostick.com. You can pick up one of our books, Anxiety at Work or Leading with Gratitude. And no, thanks, TJ, for having me on. This has been a really fun, engaging conversation.
Thank you for listening to Living Well with Rentwell. We hope you loved that episode.
Please be sure to head over to our website at rentwell.com/vision. We're giving away our free program called Vision Through Purposeful Action. If you're a busy person, if you struggle with finding the time and priorities, or if you're experiencing procrastination and overwhelm, this free course will help you with that.
We wish you a blessed day. Thank you for tuning in, and check in later.